Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on refugee migration and diaspora. Today we are going to talk about the coolie migration and its history with respect to the Indian subcontinent. So, I would like to begin with a quotation from a person named Munshi Rahman Khan. So Munshi Rahman Khan says the following: We came from India to do service here, completed Girmit, referring to agreement, with difficulty, and then toiled on government field as well. My district is Hamirpur in Allahabad division. My village is Bharkari in Bimbar police station. With good and bad of the land and the year, came to Dutch Guyana on 13th of April 1898. Finished my Girmit of 5 years at the field of Lust and Rust. I served as Sardar for 20 years under Manager Horst. Unquote. Rahman Khan is an indentured laborer in Suriname when he states this. This entire statement, talks about a system called Girmit. Girmit is a colloquial term for agreement. It describes a system popularly called Girmit, like I was saying. This man was talking about Girmit or agreement, as we officially know, through which people went to Dutch Guyana or Suriname to work as plantation laborers in 1898. More than 1 million Indian workers left their native country to work in the sugar plantations of British and European colonies in the Caribbean, in Southern Pacific and Indian Oceans during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Vijay Mishra is a critic who has worked extensively in the field of diaspora, Indian diaspora. So, Vijay Mishra states that the Girmit ideology can be read within the theoretical framework of the old diaspora. So, as Vijay Mishra notes, the term Girmit or Girmitya, these terms are exclusive to the experiences of the indentured population of Fiji Island, and they also marginally refer to the plantations of the South African Indians. The Girmit ideology has a historical depth, it has a historical context and a metaphorical resonance. Although the understanding of Girmit is limited to Fiji and South Africa, it also extends itself to what Terry Eagleton would understand by the term ideology. So, Terry Eagleton describes ideology as something which transcends itself to affective, unconscious, mythical, or symbolic, right? It is a kind of concept or understanding that, is born out of our affective, unconscious, and sometimes a mythical or symbolic interface with facts, with experiences. It could be our unconscious or even a symbolic perception of certain things. This leads to the formation of what Eagleton calls as ideology. So, the understanding of Eagleton's ideology is based on something wherein people may come to, invest in their own unhappiness while creating socially necessary illusion. So, this we are going to emphasize, socially necessary illusions, right? So, it is a kind on ideology people invest their own kind of collective psyche, their own collective understanding and create maybe an illusion which is socially necessary. This illusion grows out of the common memory of a community's distant and ancient land that has been lost in the case of the diaspora. So, a kind of illusion about the host land as juxtaposed with the homeland, right? Both of these understandings, once again, they may not correspond with the reality every time. However, there is a collective investment and a collective, agreement on how people want to accept, how people want to perceive both the host land and the homeland. So, from there, from this symbolic association, from this myth developed about a particular geopolitical space, the ideology is formed. So, this distant land, which is metaphorically one's home, which resides in the memory of the indentured laborers, is touched, is kind of intercepted, or it is intervened through a common understanding, through an ideological investment, right? So, initially, the memory of the distant land, the memory of the homeland was transmitted through oral narratives until it found its manifestations in written language and visual modes of representation. Referring to the Trinidad experience of the indentured laborers and reminiscing about the oral past, V.S. Naipaul in his noble lecture states the following, I quote, "We are pretending, perhaps not pretending, perhaps only feeling, never formulating it as an idea, that we had brought a kind of India with us, which we could, as it were, unroll like a carpet on the flat land." Unquote. So, in his memoir titled Prologue to an Autobiography, V.S. Naipaul, who had grown up in the Caribbean island, documents the story of a group of migrants in the summer of 1932. The indentured laborers who carried the illusion of home were also promised a glorious return to their homeland with riches that they earned from the plantations by the agents and the recruiters. So, there was always this distant homeland beaconing, and they would dream of returning to their native space with plenty of riches that they have earned from by working in the plantations. Once the contract of labor was over, it seemed that the return to home with riches was an extraordinary promise made to these subaltern, essentially lower caste and lower strata people from India. So, most of the people who would travel to the Caribbean, to Fiji, and to all these different places as labor hands, they would essentially be from the lower strata of the Indian society, mostly the lower caste people from India. So, it was quite impossible to materialize that ideal dream of going back home with plenty of riches. So, V.S. Naipaul narrates the incident of how in 1932 a ship called SS Ganges sailed from Trinidad to India, carrying Indian indentured laborers to fulfill promises of returning home. However, it eventually came back to Trinidad, having collected more immigrants from India. So, this is how it goes. SS Ganges again set off for Calcutta with other passengers. 7 weeks later, the Ganges reached Calcutta, and there, to the terror of the passengers, the Ganges was stormed by hundreds of derelicts previously repatriated who now wanted to be taken back to the other place. India for these people had been a dream of home, a dream of continuity after the illusion of Trinidad. All the India they had found was the area around the Calcutta docks. Our own past was, like our idea of India, a dream. So, we see that in the case of the indentured laborers going from India to the Caribbean to Fiji islands, they touch the host culture and their home culture through a dream, through an illusion, through a makeup kind of, not a fabrication, but an ideology which makes, the land quite besides itself, which makes the picture quite besides itself. It does not really correspond with reality. It is their understanding of home and it's their understanding of the host land. They are a little displaced from the actuality. The repeated mention of dream and illusion is noteworthy here. Migration alters how indentured laborers and migrants perceive both the home and the host countries. So, the home corresponds with the dream, whereas the host country corresponds with illusion. Trinidad has been an illusion for the Indian migrants because it has not lived up to its promises, or, in other words, what the migrants expected of it. Due to migration, India also became a dream to the migrants, which is not really their reality anymore. The coolie migration was a result of the British colonialism. Before the British rule, peasant migration in India was restricted to internal migrations. However, due to the abolition of slavery in 1833, the coolie laborers grew in number. So, the indenture system was a ready replacement for the slavery system in various sugar plantations. These plantations played a significant role in the development of the economies of countries such as Fiji, Mauritius, South Africa, Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. 1830s onwards, the peasants of India became peasants of the British Raj. With the advent of industrialization, we see that there is a change in the quality of lives, of the peasants. The peasants turn into mill hands, and later they are sent to plantations around the world as sugar hands or labor hands in sugarcane plantations. So, India at a point was called the mother country for coolies, mother country producing coolies. The word coolie, when used by the British Raj for the indentured laborers, was taken as a racial slur. So, post independence in India, the term coolie was imbued with two different meanings among the descendants of indentured laborers. So, the coolie retained two different significations, two different connotations down the generations of the indentured laborers. Coolie had a debatable origin in India. It was used to address a specific group of laborers who were hired to lift and transport heavy loads. It took the status of a corvée referring to unpaid intermittent forced labor, where these coolies, these laborers would often be made to work in unpaid or underpaid conditions in the hilly areas. While some descendants of the coolie laborers have since been ashamed of their coolie identity, and they consider distancing themselves from the coolie identity, because coolie is almost synonymous with untouchables. On the other hand, we find other descendants, another type of descendants who celebrate it. So, while some descendants of the coolie laborers distance themselves and are ashamed of the coolie identity because it is almost equal or equivalent to untouchables in India, yet others celebrate it. So, coolie inheritors having a past of indentured families, such as the prolific Guyanese poet Rajkumari Singh and acclaimed writer Gayatri Bahadur, have taken their coolie identity with retrospective pride. So, it becomes a source of pride, it becomes an essential aspect of their identity, defining their past, who their ancestors were. So, Bahadur states in her renowned work entitled Coolie Woman, The Odyssey of Indenture, which was published in 2013, and I quote from her work: "Coolie may bear a jagged edge like a broken bottle raised in threat, But it also ricochets still down dirt lanes in the Guyanese village where I was born in far more complicated ways, in greetings that are sometimes menacing but also often affectionate and intimate, signifying a sense of shared beginnings. It bears the burden of history. Unquote. Bahadur Gayutra states the Skuli diaspora is synonymous with a movement to reclaim the word Kuli, to invest it with pride and subvert the old stigma. And this is at least a generation old, right? Before I was born, the Guyanese poet Rajkumari Singh issued a call: proclaim the word, identify with the word, proudly say to the world, I am Kuli, unquote. So, Bahadur Gayutra actually almost takes pride in the legacy that has been bequeathed to her by a writer like Rajkumari Singh, and she says that this resistance by the Kuli diaspora is at least a generation old. It started with the path-breaking work of Rajkumari Singh, and it actually encouraged all of us from the Kuli diaspora to reclaim our past, to reclaim our identity, and proclaim the word and tell proudly to the world that yes, we are from the Kuli diaspora. We are children of forefathers who have worked as indentured laborers, as coolies. So it is a way of taking away the stigma that is associated, that has been traditionally associated with this term. Mauritian poet Khal Torabuli actually draws a parallel between the term coolie and negritude and formulates the concept of coolitude. So that's the term Torabuli coins, coolitude. The concept of coolitude deconstructed the opprobrium attached to the coolies of the empire and emphasized the specificities of the first generation coolie experience together with experiences of their descendants spread globally today, right? So Khal Torabuli first laid out the fundamentals of coolitude in his book of poetry. The poetry book was named Kale d'Etoile's Coolitude, published in 1992, and it was later published by Seagull Books in English as Cargo Hold of Stars in 2021 and translated by Nancy Naomi Carlson. Torabuli coins this term coolitude and emphasizes what Balanji would call as, I quote, the foundational coolitudian symbols of the ship, the voyage, and the plantation as central to an ever disorienting yet ever familiar coolie-centric oceanic memory. So rather than any negative association with the term, coolitude is talking about the voyage, the journey, the disorienting experiences, the challenges that a laborer faces when there is a geopolitical special shift. A person travels to another geopolitical space, another location to earn money. All the experiences that are associated with the coolie life and kind of collected and burdened to this term coolitude. Coolitude is actually kind of pregnant with the meaning of a coolie's difficult experiences tiding over the conditions, in a new life, in a new country, with a new identity, right? So, Torabuli points out that this collective memory spans time and space. The trauma of continuous displacement, the treacherous journey of moving across the sea, the difficulties faced upon arrival in a new land, and the constant processes of creolization heavily impacted the current experience of post-indenture Indians around the world. So when we talk of creolization here, we refer to a process of blending the elements from different cultures to create a new culture. This was something inherent to the experience of the indentured laborers or the coolies. According to Jason Muller and Joanna Abel, Torabuli does not define the concept of coolie in terms of exclusion. Rather, The term has been used in a figurative sense and illuminates a specific phenomena of globalization and suggests the globalization of migrants who are searching for work and better life while crossing the sea. So, Torabuli's portrayal of the journey of crossing oceans is unique as it refers to the poetics and the saga of these Indian populace who crossed the Kalapani or the Black Water, as it was popularly called. The focus on the transoceanic journey brings in maritime symbols. The maritime symbols are rife in these documentations. The central image of coolitude revolves around the metaphorical implications of coral. uh, in fact, the chair coral referring to the coral flesh, which stands for or which represents the hybrid relationalities in island cultures. How the caste system of India, for example, would be completely, mixed up in the Jahaji culture, in the ship culture, and further how these people would be dispersed and shuffled, their identities be shuffled into hybrid relationalities in the island cultures. All these things, all these factors inform the term coolitude. So, Mueller and Abel say that negritude and coolitude are connected by two ideas. One is the reconciliation of the descendants of the oppressed that support the efforts to come to grips with or to come in terms with the historical tensions between the legacy of the Atlantic slave trade and that of the coolie in Creole societies. And then, second is the idea of conceptual negotiation and a constant redefinition. So, the scholars therefore study how the descendants of the oppressed reconcile the efforts made to come in terms with the historical tensions between the Atlantic legacy of the slave trade and the legacy of the coolies in Creole societies. These two, kind of practices are being paralleled, being seen as analogous practices. And then the idea of conceptual negotiation and redefinition, right? So, this is something that interests the study made by Mueller and Abel. Then, the diversity of language is significant in reading Torabuli. So, the author talks of a transformative and shifting identity, an identity that is in a state of flux. When migrants are moving from one side of the ocean to another, they are not merely getting transferred, rather, they are transported to a different identity and linguistic structure. To quote Torabuli, no longer the Hindu man from Calcutta, but coral flesh from the Indies. Right? So, as Torabuli notes, these people are no longer the Hindu man from Calcutta, but coral flesh from the Indies. Right? From being a human, they have been reduced to almost the coral flesh. They are part of the maritime life. Everything that they possess, is invested towards working in the sugarcane plantations, harvesting sugarcanes. So, their lives are transformed into sugar hands, labor hands in the sugarcane fields. The traumas and the extent of psychological and psychosocial tensions of transoceanic crossings of Indians get its manifestation through the language of coolitude. The transoceanic painful journeys and Kalapani crossings by the migrants who are in desperate need of work have transformed the identity of these migrants altogether. So, reference to Kalapani in the Indian context is associated with the cellular jail in Port Blair, where the British would send most of the anti-colonial leaders, the leaders who fought against colonization, the leaders who fought against the British Raj, who the British would call as terrorists. All these so called terrorists of native origin would be sent to Port Blair. So Kalapani always had this historical, negative connotation coming down from the British period, the period of colonization. In the 20th century, the Indian freedom fighters were sent to Port Blair by the British colonial administration. Right, all these freedom fighters who would be arrested would mostly be sent to the cellular jail. So, Kalapani or Black Waters, literally translated, uh, in diaspora, it would mean the forbidden sea that stretched between India and America. In and around the 1830s, the large scale migration of indentured laborers took place by crossing this Kalapani to work in the sugar plantations. So the phrase Kalapani was initially applied in the Indian Penal Code of the early 19th century. Later in Trinidad, the term suggested a loss of caste, losing one's status or caste in society, and it referred to the social status experienced by the migrants who had left India. Right? Going to Kalapani was tantamount to losing one's caste, and that was a similar kind of experience that the migrants faced once they had left India for Trinidad, for Fiji Islands, and so forth. So, factors such as starvation, chronic debt, domestic violence, and caste oppression were responsible for these migrations. The indentured laborers were recruited by the Arkatis, referring to the recruiting agents who were working for the British government. The process of disruption of caste was rooted in the crossing of Kalapani. Some of the indentured laborers would be kidnapped and they would be lured into the ships that were heading to the Caribbean, to Mauritius or Fiji. The laborers had to go through the process of selection tests in order to prove their ability to work in the sugarcane plantations. Before sailing to work in sugar colonies, they were provided with emigration passes which stated their name, sex, age, identification marks, name of their village, their caste, as well as the date of departure. An estimated 3 months were required to cross the Kalapani or the black waters of Indian Ocean and Atlantic and reach the destination. The indentured laborers would reach Calcutta from Bihar, from other parts of Bengal, as well as from Uttar Pradesh, and they would then be deported mainly from the Khidirpur port or the Khidirpur dock on Hooghly River. 3 months in a boat would usually result in the mingling up of people belonging from different castes. They could be Brahmins, they could be Shudras, they could be untouchables coming from different sections and different regions of the Indian society, the large Indian subcontinent. And in this regard, critic Brinsley Samaru has coined the phrases Brahmin by birth and Brahmin by boat. So we see the following: men and women from the villages of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar looking around in the receiving depot and seeing no one who could attest to their true origins. And they gave themselves new names which indicated the upward direction which they now wished to pursue. They were now Singh or lion, Sher or tiger, Rajkumari or princess, Maharaj or great king, Mahavir or great warrior. There were now many new Brahmins. We see that there were now many new Brahmins by boat rather than by birth, because they were leaving a history of caste exploitation, starvation, oppression behind them, and there was no one to see how life would turn out in the future in the boat and in the islands onward. They could actually rename themselves. That life, one could say, it wouldn't be wrong to say that the life in the ship was like a bricolage. It was a heterotopia once again, where anything could happen. It could unfold n number of possibilities, n number of meanings. One could make out of one's identity what they wanted. They could just become an upper caste by adopting a new name. So identities were being reshuffled in the migration process. Post partition, it was almost impossible to return to the great India, mostly due to social exclusions and affordability. So India remained a dream, a distant dream for these coolies and their descendants. Uh, the descendants of this diverse diaspora have formed, therefore, a unique social equalization, so we see that the ship becomes a space where identities can be reshuffled. It is a heterotopia. It is a bricolage where people can assume new identities. And the diverse Coolie diaspora is therefore uniquely equalized. There is a unique social equalization going on by making one's co-immigrant as the Jahaji Bhai and the Jahaji Behen outside of the caste system, which would function mainly within the Indian subcontinent. Once they are departing the Indian subcontinent, they become Jahaji Bhais and Jahaji Behens, which is a kind of equal relationship outside of the caste hierarchies which they have previously experienced. So, with this, I would like to stop my lecture here today, and let's meet with further discussions in our next lecture. Thank you.